俺は吉田東洋を殺していない。どんな汚名を着ようと生きて絶対に犯人を突き止める。
Hey everyone, I'm Jeff Haynes, Senior Editor, Head of Games and Digital at Common Sense Media, and I'm here today with a quick look at Like a Dragon Ishin. It's a game that came out on February 21st, 2023 for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Windows PC. Now, a fair note of warning for all parents and caregivers, this is a mature action-adventure title that features a lot of blood from a lot of the combat sequences that you'll wind up finding yourself in within the gameplay. Now, we've tried to cut down what we could, but some of it simply is unavoidable. There's also a lot of mature language and some sequences where your character and some other characters will wind up drinking a lot of alcoholic beverages and other mature sequences as well that probably aren't the best for younger viewers. If you happen to have any questions or concerns about what you'll see within this video or any other form of media, be sure to go to our website over at commonsensemedia.org, where we have a full breakdown of what you can find within this game or any other piece of media that you're interested in. So what is Like a Dragon Ishin? Well, it's a game that was originally released in 2014, but has been remastered and re-released for the current generation of systems. This is also one of those titles that's a part of the Yakuza series, but it's actually a little bit of an offshoot. Instead of those games, which were evenly anchored within modern-day Japan, this one takes place during the late Edo period, right before the Meiji Restoration, which was the period of time when the samurai were still in power, and Japan was starting to turn from being an isolationist country to opening its doors thanks to a lot of Western ships arriving on their shores. Now, you wind up taking on the role of Sakamoto Ryoma, a young samurai who has recently returned to his hometown of Tosa because he's gone off to train himself to become a better samurai, a better swordsman, and a better fighter and man overall, only to discover that the ruling class is really starting to oppress a lot of the people in the town. In fact, as you can see on screen, this young woman and her daughter, who happens to be ill, are simply trying to find medicine, and they're being stopped by these two samurai. And for Ryoma, he really can't have it. As you can see, with one punch, he's basically broken the operating order that everybody's gotten used to. In fact, if anybody wound up interfering with these Joshi's business, they could be put to death or put in jail. And Ryoma simply does not care, because for him, he knows exactly what a samurai is supposed to do and what exactly they are supposed to stand for. And as you can see, some of the dialogue that's popping up on screen, he was born there. He knows exactly what he's supposed to do, but he simply doesn't care, because as an educated man and as an educated swordsman, he also has an idea of how things are supposed to be and how things should be, especially if they're going to be better in Japan. Of course, that winds up getting him into a lot of trouble. We're going to skip over that because that happens to be a really, really important plot point that you discover in the very early parts of the game itself. So we're going to move ahead a little bit further to this meeting between Takechi, one of Ryoma's foster brothers, Toyo, who happens to be Ryoma's mentor, and Ryoma himself. Unfortunately for them, as they're trying to decide and discuss Tosan politics, a masked man winds up attacking Toyo in the middle of this meeting, thereby causing a very serious wound. Unfortunately, even though Ryoma is a very skilled swordsman, he is no match for this man, and as you can see on screen, there happens to be this fatal killing strike that occurs, thereby destroying the life that Ryoma has known and killing the man that sent him off to become trained and to become a better man. This is a very bittersweet moment. He's really only just regained connection with his father figure, his mentor, only to suddenly lose him in such a brutal fashion. And he has no idea what exactly has happened, but also he has no idea who would have done this. But he does know that if he stays there, everybody's going to think that he was the one that actively tried to kill his mentor himself. That precipitates not only a chase through this complex to find out exactly the identity of this masked man, but also in many ways the plot, the revenge plot, an investigation that Ryoma embarks on to figure out exactly who this person is. Now, as you can see on screen, this winds up culminating within a big fight within the courtyard of this particular complex. This also highlights in many ways the combat system of Like a Dragon Ishin. You have 4 different fighting styles, which is Brawler, as you can see at the bottom, which is an unarmed style, the Gunman style, where you're using a pistol, the Swordsman style, where you use your katana, and Wild Dancer, which merges both the Gunman and Swordsman style into a very flashy, flamboyant, and acrobatic style of combat. One of the interesting things about Like a Dragon Ishin is that you can't button mash your way through every fight and expect to have a certain amount of success. In fact, you really have to worry about the parries, the counters, and everything else. And in this particular case, this is a very powerful attack that was launched, which launches into a cinematic itself with a quick time event, whereby if you wind up getting the right button combination, you can actually parry or counter what's going on and cause your own damage. It really kind of heightens the sense of drama when it comes down to a lot of the fights that are going on within the game itself. So we'll flash forward a little bit more where Ryoma has decided to leave Tosa. He decides that he's no longer going to be considered a samurai. He's going to become a ronin, and he's going to leave the town that he knows and go to the capital city of Kyoto to get more information about the masked man that killed his mentor. Of course, as he winds up just entering the streets of Kyoto, he discovers ronin and bandits are accosting a priest right outside of a shrine. And of course, for a samurai that happens to be a morally upstanding man, even though he happens to be a ronin without a master, this is something that you simply do not do, not only on a moral sense, but on an ethical and spiritual sense. So, of course, this precipitates its own fight. Again, as I was just mentioning, this is one of those circumstances where you can't just simply hit buttons to make your way through. You have to gauge who exactly is attacking you and how you're going to counter and parry their blows, because frequently you're going to be attacked from all sides. Of course, in this particular case, we wind up taking the opportunity to perform a very powerful finishing attack on somebody that happened to be down on the ground from one of our previous attacks. Now, some of the things that are really well known about the Yakuza series, or even the Like a Dragon series, is the fact that there's a ton of things that you can do in the towns. In fact, we're going to go through a really quick sequence of a number of these in a few seconds. But right here, we're going into a dojo so that we can improve our brawler style. In fact, the more that you wind up using a particular style, the more accustomed you happen to be, so you can do more damage. You can augment your skills. You can gain new abilities. It winds up being a very useful thing that you can do. Right here, of course, it seems a little out of place in some ways for a fighting game, but this fishing minigame is actually very, very important for a number of reasons. For one thing, of course, there's the zen aspect of just simply fishing instead of fighting all the time. But as you fish, you gain, obviously, the animals that you can then use in cooking applications. You can sell them to stores or to traders. You also gain virtue simply by the fact that you have managed to perform a very zen action. And that virtue, as I'm going to get to in a little bit, will have very serious implications for your character. You even, in this particular circumstance, have the option to go to karaoke bars. It's really, really interesting because a lot of the mini-games, a lot of the tasks that you do seem a little disjointed in some ways, especially when it comes to something this rapid fire, but they're very important. For one thing, aside from the fact that it is a cultural touchstone, it winds up having an impact with the relationships that you form within the towns, or the populace of Kyoto itself. The townspeople start to get to know you based off of the actions that you do and the tasks that you perform. So in this particular case, as you can see kind of in the upper right hand of the screen, there's an audience meter that kind of gauges just how well you're performing. And of course, as you wind up doing a very good job, they wind up reacting. The townspeople will then start to add that to your virtue, to your renown within the town. So then as you're walking through the streets or running through the streets, you're pursuing some of the tasks and the side missions that you have along the way during the game, people start to recognize you. They start to know exactly who you are. They realize you're the person that's actively fighting for other people. You're not just simply a stuck-up samurai that happens to do whatever they want to do because they happen to have more status than they do. It winds up becoming this really interesting circumstance that feeds upon itself. But on top of that, the virtue that you gain for doing all of these tasks winds up being something that you can then redeem at shrines and at temples for stat buffs, for items, for additional abilities and other things that you can acquire. In fact, as you move further ahead, and you get your own place, or you start to acquire essentially a farm and a house, you can start to then use some of the other things, as you can see on screen, to grow crops. These crops can be used to be sold back to the villagers and some of the people in Kyoto. They can be sold to traders. You can even use the food that you wind up growing to cook dishes, which you can then sell to chefs. You can use them for health benefits. You can have all of these other items. And of course, performing all of these tasks, like the cooking, like the farming, grows your renown, grows your virtue, which then makes you a stronger character overall. It winds up becoming a really interesting cycle where every single activity that you do has some further implication down the road to making you a much stronger fighter during the game. Now, speaking of fighting, we're going to go into one of the darker sections of the game, which is Makuragai, or basically one of the cutthroat alleys of Kyoto. It's a place that a lot of people don't particularly wish to go. In some cases, you wind up going there frequently because either people that you're chasing or people that you're looking for go there because they know that they can easily hide out. But of course, this is also one of those places where frequently if you wind up running into anybody, you're going to get yourself into a fight. In this particular case, we've decided instead of using our sword or any other weapon, we've decided to go into the brawler style. And as you can see, a lot of it is really based on using your fists, using your feet, powering yourself up. And as you can see, the glow around him is kind of this heat meter, which allows him to perform more powerful strikes in combat. Again, you can't really button mash your way to success. You really have to gauge exactly how you're going to strike, whether or not you can break the block of somebody that happens to be in front of you, if it's worth it to throw them or simply kick them, or maybe toss them into one wall to daze them so that you can take out the other people that happen to be around them. Let's get back to some other sections that are really, really key to part of the plot. And in this particular sense, you're getting a sense of the cinematics of the game. Part of the thing about Like a Dragon is they have a lot of cinematics to tell you a lot of what the story happens to be, some of the key sequences. In this particular case, Ryoma has managed to make his way to the Shinsengumi headquarters, who it happens to be a group that many people kind of find to be mercenary within the town of Kyoto. In fact, a lot of people call them wolves because they're not entirely sure if they're a good group or not, but they seem to be somewhat on the darker side or the criminal side. They're having tryouts for new members, and one of the things that Ryoma discovers as he makes his way through the earlier sections of the game is that the Shinsengumi are the only people that happen to be the only people that have the Tenon Rishin style of swordplay, which happens to tie back to the masked man who killed Ryoma's mentor. Of course, that winds up being one of those things that forces him into this fighting sequence right here against one of the captains of the Shinsengumi, Nagakura Shinpachi, who is a very, very skilled swordsman on his own. In fact, he happens to be a very powerful fighter. And of course, the interesting thing here, again, is the fact that, as you can see, a lot of it is parrying, blocking, knowing exactly when you're going to be able to sidestep an attack to get in your own strike to cause additional damage. Right here, of course, this is the very beginning of the game, so Ryoma isn't as powerful as he could be. Further along, as you start to grow in your influence, in your skills, in your experience, you can also gain followers that you can then use some of their abilities, some of their skills that they can basically teach or imbue to you so that you can rejuvenate yourself in the midst of battle, cause additional damage, increase the armor that you happen to have, and have a better chance, a fighting chance in certain sequences against bosses that you'll face off against. Of course, right here, the simple fact of the matter is we've skipped ahead a little bit because it's really important. Ryoma manages to get to a stalemate with Nagakura. It's one of those things that not many people actively see, without the exception of the very best swordsmen across the land. Mainly because if you happen to be at his level, you are really one of the better fighters around. And so the fact that Ryoma manages to get to this stalemate elevates him much more than just your regular fighter that winds up walking in off the streets. In fact, frequently a lot of them basically have to tap out, but he manages to hold his own and gain a really nice position within the Shinsengumi. In fact, in some cases, a lot of people might consider it to be a little bit too comfortable and too cushy for somebody that's literally just walked through the door. But one of the things that you will discover, and that Ryoma will discover, is that these guys really aren't necessarily as bad as they seem, but they're also not necessarily as good. They all have their own political motivations, their own goals, their own tasks, and as they wind up being dispatched to do other missions, whether that happens to be going for political dissidents or putting down crime sprees or doing other things, all of a sudden you start to realize that the Shinsengumi aren't exactly what they seem, and the people that are in charge are possibly having their own goals and their own motives as they're pursuing things, which could possibly rip Kyoto apart by the seams. So we're coming up on the tail end of this particular video, but this is actually a very important moment at the very beginning of the game, because as you can see, Ryoma has just walked into a captain's meeting. Now, of course, everybody happens to know him as the new hotshot. Of course, they wound up seeing him fighting Nagakura the previous day, but all of a sudden he winds up walking into a captain's meeting, and nobody really knows exactly why. The reason being, of course, is that he happens to have been elevated, as Nagakura acknowledges him, to the position of a captain for the 3rd Division. It's not exactly something, as you can see right there, that everybody believes he has earned or has any right to acquiring so in such a short period of time. And as you can see, it's definitely not one of those things that everybody feels comfortable with. But that is also one of the things that really starts to kick the ball off down the road towards a very, very thrilling conclusion within the plot itself. And of course, as he introduces himself as Saito Hajime, his alias for his investigation, we leave everything right there. So that's a really quick look at Like a Dragon Ishin. For more top picks and advice to fit your family, be sure to go to commonsensemedia.org.